The 15th floor miracle, when a war dog fell and the world stopped breathing. The story opens in utter quiet, a hospital corridor at 2:14 a.m., where a notification ping decides life or death. 3 floors below, a dog with more shrapnel than bone twitches in his sleep, reliving explosions no therapy can erase. Yet by dawn, he will walk on trembling legs into a room of veterans who've forgotten how to feel, and something seismic will happen. Emails will flood Congress. Strangers will mail crayon drawings labeled "Hero Pup." And a disgraced colonel will risk his career to say, "We got it wrong." Keep watching, because this isn't just a rescue. It's the blueprint for how love, loyalty, and one determined German shepherd can turn a nation's shame into its proudest salute. The wind clawed against the glass panes of the 15th floor apartment as if trying to get in. Chicago in late January had a way of silencing the streets beneath it, blanketing the noise in a dull, freezing hush. But inside Troy Beckett's apartment, the silence was anything but peaceful. The TV was off, the lights were low. Shadows stretched long against the cracked walls, flickering every time headlights passed by far below. Troy sat alone at the edge of his couch, hunched forward, elbows on his knees, his hands trembling slightly. The hum of the refrigerator, the creak of settling pipes, the faint sirens in the distance. To anyone else, they were background noise. But to Troy, they were coded messages. Enemy chatter, echoes from another world. He hadn't slept in 2 nights, maybe 3. He couldn't remember. What he did know was that something was wrong, something in the air, something in the quiet. Across the room, Asher, the retired military K-9, lay near the balcony door, alert, still, eyes fixed on Troy. He hadn't moved in minutes. He could sense it. He had always known when something inside Troy shifted, when the shadows of the battlefield returned without warning. Troy's breathing picked up. He rose slowly, his knees creaking beneath him, and stared out the balcony window. "They're watching," he whispered. "They always do." His hand clenched around the edge of the curtain. Then suddenly he turned. His eyes locked onto Asher. The German shepherd didn't flinch. He merely blinked, ears perked, tail still, waiting. Always waiting. Troy's breath hitched. In his mind, something fractured. Asher's silhouette became blurry, warped into something darker. No, you weren't there before. You weren't here yesterday." His voice shook. "Who sent you?" Asher stood up slowly, cautiously, taking 1 step forward. That was all it took. Troy staggered back, eyes wide, heart pounding. His mind screamed intruder, spy, threat. He wasn't in Chicago anymore, not in a tiny apartment with yellowed blinds and peeling wallpaper. He was in Kandahar, or Fallujah, or some half-remembered outpost where a wrong move meant death. "I said stay back!" he shouted, stumbling toward the balcony. He reached for the old leash hanging by the door, not to walk, but to trap. His hand grazed the handle. Asher didn't growl, didn't bark, just watched. But to Troy, the silence felt like confirmation. Then came the moment. Brief, surreal, irreversible. With a movement so fast it startled even himself, Troy lunged forward, grabbed the leash, and clipped it to Asher's collar. In one sweeping motion, before doubt could creep in, he yanked the door open and pulled the dog forward. "No more watching," he whispered. "No more lies." And then, with a strength born not of hate but of fear, Troy hurled Asher over the railing. The sound was sickening. There was no bark, no scream, just the rush of air, the sudden absence of weight, and the awful realization seconds too late that something sacred had just been destroyed. Troy stumbled backward, shaking violently, his face pale. The leash dangled in his hand like a noose. His knees gave out and he crumpled to the floor, rocking. Down below, the silence of the night was broken. The night had fallen cold and quiet. But Miguel Sandoval didn't mind. 14, hoodie half-zipped, beanie tilted sideways. He was used to skating until his fingers went numb. The parking lot beneath the Windmere Towers was his unofficial skate park, mostly empty after dark, smooth concrete, and just enough yellow-orange light to catch the curves of his board as it twisted mid-air. His earbuds were in, blasting some punk band that helped drown out the world, the fights at home, the bills, the echo of his mom crying when she thought no one was listening. Out here, with the wheels under his feet and wind slicing against his jacket, he was free, untouchable. Then he felt it, a pressure change, like gravity held its breath. Something moved above, not a bird, not a piece of trash caught in the wind, something bigger. He yanked one earbud out just in time to hear a gut-wrenching thump, followed by an unnatural bone-deep silence. Miguel stopped cold, heart racing. The board rolled on without him, hitting a trash can and clattering over. He looked up. His eyes caught the faintest ripple on a high balcony, curtains billowing, a shadow withdrawing. Then he looked down. A dark figure sprawled across the concrete 20 feet away. At first he thought it was a person, a kid, maybe. But as he edged closer, breath held, he saw the shape clearly. A dog. A big one. Fur matted, limbs twisted, blood beginning to pool around it like spilled ink. And it was still breathing. Miguel's instincts kicked in, overriding the numb shock crawling up his spine. He sprinted forward, skidding on his knees beside the animal. The dog was gasping, shallow, ragged sounds that didn't match its still, battered frame. One eye was half closed, the other barely open, glinting under the street lamp like a cracked marble. Miguel didn't know much about dogs, but he knew when something was fighting to stay alive. "Hey! Hey!" he shouted into the night, voice cracking. "Somebody! Help! I need help here!" A window opened above. A woman screamed. Another voice called out, "What was that?" Miguel didn't wait. He tore off his hoodie and gently, so carefully it made his fingers shake, slid it under the dog's head, cradling it the way his mom once held their old Labrador the night it had a seizure. His hands were slick with blood. He didn't flinch. He just kept whispering, "It's okay, buddy. You're okay. Stay with me. Please." A doorman ran out of the lobby, talking frantically into a walkie-talkie. "I need EMS at Windmere Towers, South Lot, possible fall victim. It's a dog, I think. It's bad. Real bad." Lights flicked on across the building's facade. People leaned out, phones already in hand, filming, murmuring, speculating. Did it fall? No, it was thrown. That dog just dropped from the sky. Miguel tuned it all out. He was focused on one thing, that rise and fall of a shattered chest, trembling but still moving. The dog's legs looked broken, one bent at an angle no leg should bend, ribs jutted under fur, blood seeped from its mouth in slow, syrupy rivulets, but it looked at him. For a second, just 1 second, the animal's eyes found his, and Miguel swore he saw something, not pain, not fear, resignation, a kind of weary knowing. This dog had been here before, had survived worse, had been taught to suffer in silence. Miguel's throat clenched. He gently pressed his palm to the dog's neck, checking for a pulse like he'd seen in movies. "Hang on, buddy," he whispered. "You don't get to leave. Not like this." A woman ran over with a blanket. A man in scrubs who lived in 5B knelt beside him and murmured something medical-sounding. Fractured thorax, spinal risk, Red and white lights finally cut through the darkness as sirens wailed down the street. Paramedics rushed in. A stretcher built for large animals hastily pulled from the back. One of them looked at Miguel and hesitated. "You found him?" He nodded. "He's breathing. Barely." They slid the stretcher underneath with careful, practiced precision. Someone placed a collar brace around the dog's neck, stabilizing the spine. Miguel backed away only when they lifted the frame and wheeled it toward the ambulance. He stood in the pool of blood his hoodie had soaked up, shivering in just his t-shirt, staring after them. Before the doors shut, one of the medics called over, "What's your name, kid?" "Miguel," he said hoarsely. "Thanks, Miguel. You probably gave him a shot." The doors slammed shut, and the sirens faded into the distance. Miguel stood there for a long moment, hands red, breath fogging, heart still wrapped around the image of broken eyes that refused to close. Somewhere high above, a man sat in an empty apartment, unaware that the thing he threw away had just found a reason to keep fighting. It was just past 9 p.m. when Dr. Emma Lynn peeled off her gloves and leaned against the break room sink, fatigue sinking into her bones. She hadn't eaten since lunch. The clock on the wall ticked too loud, the fluorescent lights too cold. Nights like this at the Wyndham Animal Emergency Center were always unpredictable. Broken bones, swallowed socks, or the occasional porcupine quill job gone wrong. She took a sip of cold coffee that tasted like metal and regrets. Then came the slam of the ambulance bay doors. She barely had time to process the sound before the intercom crackled. "Incoming severe trauma, large breed K9, no tag, no microchip, found downtown, possible spinal injuries, chest trauma." Emma straightened before the announcement finished. The coffee hit the sink with a splash. She moved fast, pushing through the hallway as paramedics rolled in the stretcher, and that's when she saw him. At first, all she could register was blood. Too much blood. It soaked the padding beneath the dog's body, matted in thick clumps against dark fur. Bandages were already wrapped around one leg, bent unnaturally, and his ribs rose and fell with painful hesitation. But then her eyes met his, and everything else fell away. There was something old in that gaze. Not just pain, not confusion, but a kind of exhausted alertness, like someone who had seen the edge of the world and crawled back from it. His eyes weren't clouded, they were searching. She whispered, "Oh my God," without realizing. "He fell. From high up. Witness says 15 stories, one of the EMTs said, breathless. Survived the fall somehow. Teen boy found him, wrapped him in a hoodie." Emma didn't respond. She was already moving, already assessing. "Get him into OR2. Run full vitals. Let's prep for chest X-ray and ultrasound." She crouched beside the stretcher, her gloved fingers skimming gently along the dog's flank. Bruises already bloomed purple beneath the fur. His paw twitched once as she touched his abdomen. "Pulse is thready but present," the tech called out from the monitor. "BP's low." "Could be internal bleeding," Emma muttered. "Fractured thoracic wall, possibly spleen rupture. Get me a transfusion unit ready." She should have been all clinical, detached and efficient. But she wasn't. Because beneath the blood and trauma she saw what others might miss. This wasn't a regular pet. His frame was lean but powerfully built, the kind of muscle memory no domestic life could shape. The scars along his side weren't from rough play. They were healed with time and silence. He had seen things, done things, survived them. Emma gently brushed a patch of dried fur behind his ear and noticed it, barely visible under matted hair. A faint line of numbers, tattooed in dark ink. Her breath caught. She leaned in. Military ID. She didn't need confirmation. She'd seen one other like this during her internship at a VA canine facility in Texas. Dogs like him weren't born for backyards or tennis balls. They were bred and trained to walk through gunfire, to smell fear, to lie silently in foxholes next to men who forgot how to cry. "He's a soldier," she whispered. The dog's eye, the one not swollen shut, flicked toward her voice. And something inside Emma cracked. She pressed her palm against his chest, feeling the rhythm beneath the torn flesh. Barely hanging on, but still there. "You're not dying tonight," she said. Her voice wasn't a request. It was a promise. A vet tech appeared beside her with a blanket. "What do we call him?" Emma hesitated. There was no collar, no name tag, no file. But somehow naming him felt sacred, something that should come after. "For now," she said, eyes never leaving his. "Just hold the line. Everything else can wait." The staff got to work. IVs were placed, blood pressure monitored, an oxygen mask gently laid over his muzzle. His eyelids flickered but didn't close. He was watching everything. Hours passed like minutes. Emma didn't leave his side. Even as the X-rays confirmed the worst, fractured ribs, one foreleg splintered, internal bruising along the spine, she stayed, silent, focused, her hand resting against the patch of fur above his heart. The surgical team cleaned the wounds, stabilized the leg, administered meds to ease the pain. Through it all, he never once whimpered. When they finally wheeled him into recovery, Emma followed, wiping her forehead with the sleeve of her coat. The hallway was quiet now. Only the steady beep, beep, beep of the monitors filled the space. She pulled up a chair beside his cage, now clean and padded, his body swathed in white wraps like a war-worn mummy. Machines breathed for him, tubes fed him, but his soul, his will, was his own. "You were trained to protect," she murmured, voice thick with emotion. "And someone threw you away like trash." Her fingers brushed the fur between his ears, careful to avoid the stitches. "Not here. Not with me. I don't know who you were before tonight. But starting now, you're not alone." As if in response, his paw twitched. Barely. But it was there. Emma closed her eyes, pressing her hand gently over his. "I've got you, soldier. I swear to God, I've got you." Outside, the snow began to fall. Inside, under pale light and quiet machines, a forgotten warrior held on. Not because he had the strength left, but because someone had finally seen him. The soft whirring of machines filled the recovery room like a lullaby of survival. Asher lay still, his chest rising and falling with fragile rhythm beneath layers of clean bandages. A heating pad lined the bottom of the cage, keeping his core temperature stable. An IV snaked down from a bag above, delivering antibiotics and fluids at a slow, steady pace. Every beep from the heart monitor was a small declaration. Still here, still fighting. Dr. Emma Lynn hadn't left since surgery ended. Her shift should have ended hours ago. Most of the other staff had gone home, lights dimmed in the main wing. But Emma stayed in that cold room, her palms resting on her knees, eyes locked on the injured dog in front of her. This anonymous survivor, with war etched into every muscle fiber. She watched his ears twitch in his sleep. The sedation held him gently, but even unconscious, Asher remained alert in ways no normal dog ever should. His body was battered, broken, but his instincts, they were still intact. She leaned forward, adjusting the oxygen mask slightly. "Who are you?" she murmured. The absence of a microchip was strange enough. These days, even house cats had digital IDs. And there was no collar, no name tag, nothing to suggest a home or human to return to, nothing except... She squinted, brushing the matted fur gently back from his right ear. There, just inside the soft inner flesh, something caught the light. Faded ink, barely visible. She blinked, heart suddenly picking up speed. It was a number. A line of alphanumerics tattooed in regulation font, worn but readable. K9, 78324 USM. Emma sat back, chills running down her spine. It wasn't just any ID, it was military. She'd seen it once before during her trauma rotation at the VA in Fort Carson. A retired bomb-sniffing dog brought in with shrapnel wounds. They all had these tattoos. Silent proof of service. Forgotten by most, honored by few. Asher stirred slightly, his paw twitching. Emma reached out and laid her hand gently on his side. "You weren't just someone's pet," she whispered. "You wore a uniform once." The realization hit her like a freight train. He wasn't just a rescue. He was a veteran. She stood quickly and grabbed her tablet, fingers flying. She knew the military worked in codes. She knew access wouldn't be easy, but she also knew how to dig. She typed the number into the USDA military K9 registry. The public portal returned nothing. Next, she tapped into an old contact at the National Canine Tactical Registry, a quiet email she'd once used to request case data for a conference. Subject: Possible identification request. Hi, it's Dr. Emma Lynn, DVM, Emergency Trauma, Wyndham Animal Emergency. I have a canine patient with no collar or chip. He has a military-style tattoo in his right ear, K9 78324 USM. Severe fall injury. Unknown history. Can you confirm any match? Urgent. She hit send, barely breathing. She moved to the counter and snapped a photo of the tattoo, zoomed in, time-stamped, and attached it to a second request through the DoD Animal Medical Corps system. She flagged it as medical relevance, possibly retired service animal. Still, she knew what the reality was. No name, no file, no story. Dogs like him could vanish into paperwork limbo. No next of kin, no civilian claim. If no one stepped forward, he could be labeled non-recoverable government asset. Asher shifted again, a low, unconscious whimper slipping from his chest. Not a cry of pain, a sound of confusion, of memory pressing through trauma. Emma's chest tightened. "What did they make you do?" she whispered. She pulled up a stool and sat again by his cage, her hand resting lightly against his side, not petting, not comforting, anchoring. The silence stretched for what felt like hours. Outside, snow began to stick to the windows. Inside, Emma kept vigil over a dog who had no name, no home, and for now, no voice. But he had numbers. He had scars. He had survived. And that meant someone somewhere knew who he was. Emma looked down at her tablet again. No response yet. She leaned forward and whispered near his ear, "You may have been trained to protect others, but now it's my turn." She didn't realize it then, but that quiet promise, made in a dim room beneath flickering fluorescent lights, would spark a chain of events neither of them could have imagined. Because buried in the system, behind firewalls and forgotten files, someone had once signed off on K9 78324 USM's deployment, and that someone was about to be reminded. This dog didn't die in silence. He was seen. The first email landed at 8:16 a.m. Detective Daniel Grady had just settled into his desk at the 12th Precinct, a lukewarm cup of coffee in hand, when the subject line caught his eye. Request for identification. Military canine. At first he skimmed it out of habit. Another vet's rescue? A stolen dog? A civilian misunderstanding? Some kennel tattoo? But the moment he saw the code K978324 USM, the air shifted. Something tugged at his memory. Hard. He clicked open the attached image, the faded number inked inside a German shepherd's ear. Below it, clinical notes from Wyndham Animal Emergency and a photo, not gruesome but raw. A dog half wrapped in gauze, visible bone contouring where muscle used to be. Still breathing, still alive. Daniel's jaw tightened. He recognized that look. The way some dogs stared at you, not with fear, not with aggression, but with a depth of knowing too old for any leash. He opened his internal clearance panel and searched the database under retired tactical K9s. It took 3 minutes. And when the file populated, he leaned back slowly. AS-1974. Asher. Tactical K9, United States Army assigned, K9 handler. Sergeant Callum Hart. Operations: Kandahar, Helmand, Sangin Tours. 3. Commendations: 2 bronze paws, combat valor. Purple tag, wounded in action. Status: honorably discharged 2021. Last registered owner: Sergeant Callum Hart. Return disposition, final transfer to private civilian custody. Daniel stared at the screen. Asher. He remembered the name now, not from some cold report, but from a debrief 3 years ago. He'd helped conduct a background check on Sergeant Hart for a private security job. There had been a passing reference to a K9 unit in the notes. Handler and K9 known for extreme precision, unbreakable bond. Asher was credited with the discovery of 3 IEDs before detonation. He closed the file and tapped his pen against the desk. How did a dog like that end up tossed from a 15th floor window? He picked up the phone and dialed Wyndham Animal Emergency. Dr. Lynn? Yes, speaking. This is Detective Daniel Grady with the 12th Precinct. I'm calling about the German Shepherd brought in last night. You emailed a query to military channels? Yes, Emma replied. Her voice was measured, but carried an edge like someone used to standing between life and death decisions. He has a military tattoo, no chip, no ID. He's in critical condition, but stable. I have his name, Daniel said. Asher, former Army K9, retired with commendations. There was silence on the line. Then Emma exhaled. I knew it. Any idea how he got there? All I know is a 14-year-old skater found him barely breathing under a high-rise. EMTs said the fall came from the top floors. Someone tried to kill him. Daniel's voice dropped. The last owner listed is Sergeant Callum Hart. Retired 2 years ago. No known relatives. Records show mental instability post-deployment. Hospitalized twice. Emma was quiet again. Then, so the person who should have protected him? May have been the one who threw him, Daniel finished. It wasn't anger he felt, at least not the clean kind. It was something darker, something shaped like guilt. He'd filed so many transfer reports for K9s to civilian owners, each stamped and signed, never thinking twice, never asking what happened a year later, or 2. You said he's stable? Daniel asked. For now, Emma replied, but he's holding on by a thread. Daniel looked out his office window. The city moved as if nothing had happened. Cars honking, vendors shouting, steam curling from subway grates. And yet somewhere buried in that chaos was a war dog who had done everything right and was still discarded like old equipment. I'll come down, he said. You keep him alive, There was something in Emma's voice when she answered, not just professionalism, something personal. "I will," she said quietly. "He's not dying on my table." Daniel hung up and opened his cabinet. He pulled out an old case folder, the one labeled K9 Asher, Sergeant C. Hart, from the time they cleared Hart for civilian protection work. The last note read, "Bond is exceptional. Dog is everything to the handler." He stared at it for a long time, then grabbed his coat. Because if that bond had shattered so badly that Asher was now clinging to life in a vet ER, then something had gone wrong far deeper than anyone ever documented. And Daniel wasn't about to let it disappear into silence. The apartment smelled like burned coffee and old sweat. Detective Daniel Grady stood just outside the threshold, one hand resting on his hip near the badge clipped to his belt. The door was cracked open by building security after no one answered for 20 minutes. But now, inside, it was all too quiet. Unit 1503, 15th floor. Same line of descent the EMTs had calculated from the fall trajectory. Daniel took one slow step in. "Troy Beckett," he called out. "This is Detective Grady. I just want to talk." There was a scraping sound, soft and arrhythmic, like skin dragging across linoleum, then a voice barely audible. "They were in the walls again. I heard them last night." Daniel turned the corner and saw him. Troy Beckett, age 38, retired Army Staff Sergeant, discharged under medical leave for post-traumatic psychosis. He sat cross-legged in the corner of his kitchen, arms wrapped tightly around himself, rocking slowly. His hair was matted, and dried blood crusted his knuckles. The sliding door to the balcony stood ajar. Daniel crouched down. "Hey, I'm not here to hurt you. I just want to understand what happened." Troy didn't look up. His eyes were glassy, bloodshot. His lips moved before sound followed. "They got in again, through the radio, through the vents. They were watching me. I told him to stay inside." "Him? You mean Asher?" That broke something. Troy's rocking slowed. His hands curled into fists. "I told him to stay," Troy whispered. "But he kept barking. He knew they were close. The mission was blown. We were compromised." Daniel exchanged a glance with the officer behind him. Quietly, he reached into his pocket and slid a photo forward, the one Emma had sent earlier. Asher, intubated, bruised, barely conscious. Troy stared at it for a long time. A single tear welled up at the corner of his right eye. "I thought I was protecting him," he choked. "He was the only one who stayed." Daniel's voice was gentle now. "Tell me what happened, Troy. Step by step." Troy shivered. "They were inside me. The voices. I couldn't sleep. I saw the checkpoint again. Kandahar. My whole team. Gone. But Asher. He pulled me from the wreckage, dragged me back. His leg was half gone. I never forgot that." He tapped his temple, hard. "They don't want me to remember. They twist things. They made me think. He was compromised, too." Daniel's throat tightened. There it was, the horrific truth, not told with malice, but with the fractured honesty of a mind broken by war and memory. "You opened the balcony door," Daniel said, more a statement than a question. Troy nodded slowly. "I told him to get back, but he barked, wouldn't stop. I thought maybe he was one of them now. I couldn't tell anymore." His voice cracked. "So I grabbed him, and I let go." Silence fell like a curtain. Daniel stood and signaled to the EMTs outside. "We need a psychiatric unit, now." As they moved in, Troy didn't resist. He whispered something over and over as they strapped him to the gurney. He stayed. He stayed. He stayed. That afternoon, Daniel returned to Wyndham Animal Emergency. Emma was in the observation bay, still wearing the same blue scrubs from the night before, her eyes shadowed from lack of sleep. But when she saw Daniel walk in, she turned down the oxygen monitor and met him by the sink. "You found the owner," she said. Daniel nodded grimly. Troy Beckett, retired staff sergeant, suffered a severe psychiatric break. He thought Asher was compromised, called him the only one who stayed, and then threw him from the 15th floor. Emma's hand tightened around a towel she was folding. "God." "PTSD," Daniel said. "Paranoia, delusions. The war never left him." She turned to look through the window at Asher, who was still unconscious, hooked up to IVs, his breathing assisted by a machine that wheezed in rhythm with the beeping heart monitor. "He was protecting him until the very end," she whispered, "even through the madness." Daniel exhaled, weary. "It's always the good ones, the ones who saved lives, saw the worst, and never asked for anything in return." Emma stepped closer to the glass. "He has no one else, does he? Not listed, no family, no alternate guardian." "Troy's being placed on a 72-hour psych hold, but the state will have to determine custody after that." She stared at Asher as if the world outside had vanished. "Then he's not going anywhere," she said. "Not while I'm here." Daniel didn't answer. But in that quiet room, amid the hum of machines and the faint rustle of hope trying to survive, something shifted. Not duty, not policy. Something personal. Asher wasn't just a case now. He was a survivor, and someone still had to fight for him. The beeping had become a rhythm, steady, quiet, strangely comforting. Emmeline sat on the floor of the observation room at Wyndham Animal Emergency, her back against the wall, eyes trained on the German Shepherd barely breathing behind the glass. It had been nearly 36 hours since Asher's fall. Every bone in his body had fought to give up, but he hadn't. Neither had she. A nurse tapped gently on the doorframe. "There's a man from the Department of Defense here to speak with you." Emma stood slowly. Her knees popped, her hands were cold. She met the man in the front office. He was in his early 40s, dressed not in uniform, but in the no-nonsense navy blue suit of a government liaison. His name tag read M. Solano, DOD, Animal Services. He didn't sit when she gestured, just opened a file folder and spoke plainly. "Dr. Lin, thank you for your work. I'll keep this brief. The animal currently identified as Asher, serial ID K94217AL, is still legally considered property of the United States government." Emma blinked. "What?" "He was never formally decommissioned. Though his handler was medically discharged, the proper transfer of ownership documents were never filed. Technically, that dog is on indefinite loan. His ID tattoo confirms it." Her chest tightened. "He's not a piece of equipment." Solano didn't flinch. "No offense, ma'am, but by federal code he is." She stepped closer, voice rising just enough to crack. "He was thrown off a balcony by a man suffering a complete psychotic break. That dog saved lives. Served 3 tours in Afghanistan. He's earned more than being treated like government surplus." Solano's eyes softened just a little, but his voice didn't. "I've reviewed the preliminary report. I saw the photos. It's a miracle he survived, but there's more you need to know. Because of the violent nature of the incident, combined with the lack of a certified handler present, Asher has been flagged as a Category 3 behavioral risk." Emma went still. "What does that mean?" "It means," he said carefully, that he cannot be released to civilian foster care, not without clearance from Military Animal Behavioral Command. That could take weeks. She shook her head. He doesn't have weeks. Solano closed the file. Then he will be placed in quarantine until a decision is made. Her voice dropped to a whisper. You mean a kennel? He didn't answer. Emma took a slow breath and stepped back. No. He's not going to some facility where they'll muzzle him and treat him like a ticking bomb. He's been through enough. Dr. Lin, Solano said gently, I don't make the rules. I enforce the chain of custody. If we allow one unvetted civilian to claim a K-9 flagged as unstable, he's not unstable, she snapped. He's traumatized. Solano's expression didn't change, but the way his shoulders shifted told her this wasn't the first time he'd stood in a room like this, holding the full weight of bureaucracy in his hands while someone begged to treat a soul like a life, not a liability. He handed her a form. This is a temporary hold request. It gives you 72 hours to maintain medical care while a federal review board deliberates. After that, you'll need to surrender him. Emma didn't take it. What happens if I don't? He met her gaze evenly. You could lose your license. Back in the ICU, Emma sat beside Asher's kennel. His breathing was shallow, ribs wrapped in thick gauze. An IV dripped fluids into his leg. A small tremor ran down his flank as he dreamed. Paws twitching, ears barely flicking. Property of the government, she whispered. She touched the fur just behind his ear, over the faded tattoo. I don't care who owns you, she said quietly. You're not just a serial number. She remembered the way he'd been cradled in Miguel's hoodie, the way his eyes searched the crowd even as his body shattered, the way Troy, broken as he was, had still called him the only one who stayed. He had always belonged to someone, but now no one had claimed him, except her. Later that night, Daniel returned. His badge hung lower than usual, the lines around his eyes deeper. Heard you had a visit, he said gently. Emma didn't look up from where she was adjusting Asher's bedding. 3 days. That's all they gave me. Daniel leaned against the wall. Let me make some calls. I know someone at Military Animal Behavioral. Might be able to fast-track the eval. She gave him a tired smile. Thank you. He looked through the window at Asher, still sedated. They'll try to scare you. Tell you he's a danger, that he's unpredictable. He's hurt, Emma said. He's scared. That's not the same as dangerous. Daniel nodded. Then let's prove it. The knock on the clinic's side entrance came just after dawn. Emma Lynn had spent the night on the floor beside Asher's recovery kennel again, curled in a makeshift blanket that still smelled like antiseptic and exhaustion. Her legs were numb, but her eyes shot open the moment she heard it. It wasn't the front bell. This was different, private, intentional. She opened the door to find 2 men standing beneath the gray sky, both wearing dark suits and clipped expressions. One held a briefcase, the other a sealed manila envelope. Dr. Emma Lynn? The taller one asked. She nodded, tension rising in her chest. I'm Robert Mercer, Department of Defense. This is Agent Hale, Office of Defense Bioethics. That last word, bioethics, hit like a cold wind. We're here about subject K94217AL. You know him as Asher. Emma didn't invite them in. He's stable, resting. The surgery was successful. He's shown no signs of aggression. Mercer's lips pressed into a thin line. He opened the briefcase on the clinic's counter and withdrew a file stamped Confidential, Urgent. We're aware of your work, but this decision wasn't made lightly. Asher has been flagged as an elevated liability risk based on both his behavioral history overseas and the incident involving his former handler. Effective immediately, the department has issued a euthanasia directive under Code 71C. Emma's breath caught. The world tilted, but only slightly, just enough to make her reach for the counter to stay grounded. "You're saying, you're going to kill him?" "Terminate," Hale corrected, his voice clinical. "This is standard protocol when a military asset displays signs of psychological collapse combined with a history of trauma-related aggression. He's classified as irredeemable." Emma's voice rose, trembling. "He's not a broken weapon. He's a dog, a soldier. You owe him more than that." Mercer didn't look away. "Dr. Lynn, I understand this is emotional for you. But Asher has been evaluated by multiple field reports. He's sustained neurological damage, likely PTSD, and he no longer meets threshold for retraining. Under law, we cannot risk civilian exposure." "He hasn't hurt anyone," she snapped. "Yet," Hale said, tone flat as a scalpel. Emma's fingers curled tightly. The room seemed too quiet. She could hear Asher's breathing, soft but labored, just behind the glass, the only one who stayed. "I won't allow it," she said. Mercer sighed, already expecting it. "You don't have authority to block a federal order. We'll be sending a team this Friday." Emma took a step forward, her voice sharpened by something beyond fear. "Then I'll give you a reason to delay." She snatched a clipboard from the desk and pulled a pen from behind her ear with fingers that barely shook. "I'm filing for temporary medical guardianship under state code. Asher is currently undergoing treatment for injuries sustained under my care. That makes me his attending physician. You want to kill him? You'll have to wait for the review board to rule." Mercer raised an eyebrow. "You really think a civilian veterinarian stands a chance against military protocol?" "No," she whispered. "But I think a war hero deserves someone to try." That night, the rain returned, soft at first, then harder, until it drummed like knuckles on the windows. Emma stood in the ICU again, staring through the glass. Asher lay still, wrapped in bandages and wires, his body a patchwork of old scars and fresh trauma. One eye opened slowly as if sensing her. Tired, dull, but still aware. She pressed her hand to the glass. "They came for you today," she whispered. "Not to take you home, but to make sure you don't get one." He didn't move, just blinked. "I told them no." Her voice cracked, the words dissolving into the quiet hum of machines and storm. "I don't know how I'm going to stop them, but I will." Daniel found her 2 hours later in the dark, slouched on the floor beside Asher again. "You really filed for guardianship?" he asked gently. Emma nodded without looking up. "It's a long shot." He sank down beside her, shoulder brushing hers. "You know what happens if they reject it?" "I'll appeal, all the way up if I have to." Daniel didn't say anything right away. When he did, his voice was quiet, but heavy. "You're not just fighting a policy, Emma. You're fighting a system that doesn't see him as a soul, just as history, a liability." She finally looked at him. "Then maybe it's time someone reminded them what loyalty looks like." He studied her face for a long moment. "You're going to war for a dog." Emma gave the faintest smile. "No," she said. "I'm going to war for a soldier who never stopped fighting, even when everyone else gave up." The filing cabinet in Emma's back office groaned open, and a thin layer of dust lifted as she yanked out a manila folder labeled State Veterinary Emergency Protocols, Appeals. It was nearly 11 p.m., and the clinic was supposed to be closed. But for the third night in a row, the lights in Asher's recovery room still glowed like a beacon in a war zone no one else could see. The dog was sleeping restless, twitching at times, his body wrapped in medical gauze and quiet suffering. Daniel stood at the doorway, coffee in one hand, his off-duty jacket hanging from one shoulder like he hadn't decided if he wanted to stay or go. "You're still digging?" he asked softly. Emma didn't look up. "If they think I'm going to let him vanish under a euphemism like scheduled termination, they picked the wrong vet." Daniel stepped in, placed the coffee on her desk, and sank into the chair across from her. "Then maybe you shouldn't be doing this alone." Emma stopped flipping pages. "Meaning?" He met her eyes, slow but unwavering. "I filed the initial paperwork to adopt him." Emma's breath caught. "You what?" Daniel leaned forward, resting his forearms on his knees. "Technically, any animal under federal classification can be transferred to a qualified civilian with military clearance, if it's proven they're no longer mission capable and a stable guardian is available. I was a Marine. I've worked with K-9 units. I know how to file the right forms." She stared at him, the tension in her jaw softening. "You don't even know him yet." "I've read every page of his deployment history since I got the ID number. 3 tours, 6 confirmed search and rescue operations under fire. Once pulled a wounded corporal out of a minefield by the vest. Took shrapnel doing it. Same side he fell on." He paused. "He's not a liability. He's a survivor." Emma folded her arms, heart caught somewhere between gratitude and the ache of knowing she didn't have the legal standing herself. "I don't want him to just be your project," she said, voice quiet. "Not a file, not a rescue story." Daniel's brow furrowed. He wouldn't be. Emma walked over to the window, hands in the pockets of her scrubs, staring out into the darkness where the rain had finally stopped, but the world still felt like it might collapse. "I keep thinking about what they called him. Subject K94217AL, like he was never someone, just inventory." She turned back to Daniel. "But when I looked in his eyes, I didn't see a number. I saw someone who remembers, who's terrified to remember." Daniel didn't answer right away. Then, "Do you want a co-file?" Her lips parted. "Can we?" "I'll take point on military clearance and legal. You file as primary caregiver under state guardianship. It doubles our chances." He tilted his head. "And it makes a statement that he's got a team now." Emma's eyes stung. "For what it's worth," Daniel added, "I don't think you're just trying to save a dog. I think you're trying to save something in all of us." She walked to the desk, picked up the second copy of the guardianship form, and handed it to him. "Then let's make sure he lives long enough for someone to see that." Hours later, in the quiet hum of the clinic, Emma knelt beside Asher's kennel again. His eyes fluttered open, only one fully functional now, still groggy, still drugged. She slid her fingers under the edge of the metal grate, resting them there like an unspoken promise. "They want to erase you," she whispered. "But not this time." He didn't move, but his eye locked onto hers. And for just a moment, there was the smallest twitch in his paw, like something inside him still fought to stay. "You're not a file," she said. "You're not property. You're not a broken machine." Her voice trembled. "You're Asher, and you're not going to die as a number on someone's form." In the early morning haze, Daniel dropped the adoption paperwork at the Department of Animal Compliance and then drove to the county records office to file the joint appeal. He left a copy on Emma's desk, scribbled with one note. "Round 1. Let's win this for him." Emma pinned it to the wall beside Asher's X-ray scans, dozens of tiny fragments of embedded metal still lodged deep inside him. But she didn't just see damage, she saw survival. And for the first time in years, something, was giving her a reason to fight beyond paperwork and protocol. This wasn't just about saving a dog anymore. It was about restoring a name. It was the sound she had started to memorize. The slow, shallow inhales, followed by stuttering exhales that caught on scarred lungs. A rhythm not quite natural, not quite broken. It reminded Emma of someone learning to breathe again, not just through tissue and bone, but through memory. Asher was still tethered to the oxygen line. The worst of the internal bleeding had stabilized, but his ribs bore the shape of a past life. His legs were bandaged, and his tail hadn't moved once since the surgery. He slept mostly. Or rather, he drifted in and out of unconsciousness, hovering on the edge of awareness, as if unsure whether this world was safer than the last one he remembered. It had been 4 days since the fall, 4 days of machines, medications, and merciless waiting. Emma hadn't left the clinic once. She slept on a cot in the break room, her alarm set for every 3 hours to check on him. Most nights, though, she never needed it. Her body had learned the sound of his struggle. It woke her like a phantom call. That evening, the hallway lights were dimmed, and a soft amber glow came from the night lamp in Asher's room. Emma sat cross-legged just outside the kennel door, one hand resting on the floor, the other holding a mug of tea she hadn't touched. She whispered the way people do when they hope not to wake the hurt, but need the silence to feel like something alive. "You don't have to do anything, Asher. Just stay." She watched his chest rise and fall and rise again. A soft twitch flickered at his paw. Her heart paused, then leapt. She didn't move, just watched. Minutes passed, or maybe it was an hour. The air in the room grew still, heavy with the ache of waiting, then quiet, as a page turning. Asher's head shifted a few degrees. Barely, just enough to prove he wasn't drifting anymore. His eye opened halfway. Emma exhaled for the first time in what felt like a day. She leaned in, her voice barely above breath. "Hi there," she said gently, as if talking to a child who didn't know if they were safe yet. "You made it through." Asher blinked, slow, uncertain. He wasn't looking at her, not exactly. His gaze roamed the room like a soldier clearing a perimeter, hyper-aware, haunted. Emma didn't push. "You're in Wyndham Animal Emergency. No one's going to hurt you." She reached over, not to touch him, just to adjust the soft blue elephant toy she'd placed near his muzzle. It was a child's toy, really. Plush and small, one she kept in a drawer for traumatized animals who couldn't tolerate human contact but needed something warm, something with a scent other than antiseptic and fear. She'd left it there 3 nights ago. It had remained untouched. Until now. Because tonight, Asher moved. Not far, not fast. Just a single tremulous nudge of his nose toward the elephant. It was so subtle she almost missed it. But she didn't. Tears burned her eyes so fast she had to turn away to blink them back. It wasn't the movement. It was what it meant. The will to reach. Emma cleared her throat, composing herself, and sat back down, closer this time. "Do you like him?" she whispered, nodding at the toy. "I named him Sergeant Snuffles. Pretty dignified, huh?" A slow blink. She smiled through wet lashes. "Don't worry, I won't tell the others." The air monitor beside the bed chirped once, softly. Asher's breathing had stabilized into something close to normal. She stayed with him like that for a long time, talking, whispering, filling the silence not with noise, but with presence. That was what animals remembered. Not words, but intention, vibration, the shape of someone's care. Asher didn't move again that night, but he didn't look away either. And for Emma, that was enough. At 3:11 a.m., she stepped into the break room where Daniel had dozed off on a bench. He looked like he'd been sleeping with one eye open, habit of old soldiers. When she entered, he sat up, rubbing his face. "Everything okay?" Emma just stood there for a moment, then nodded. "He moved," she said, voice tight. Daniel's brow lifted. "Moved?" She nodded again, slower this time, tears threatening again. "He nudged the elephant." It took a second for the words to land, and when they did, Daniel didn't smile. He didn't say something comforting or patronizing. He just nodded like someone who understood what a gesture like that cost. "That's the first thing they teach them in retrieval training," he said quietly. "To push a soft object toward the handler if they can't bark. It means, 'I'm here.'" Emma covered her mouth, chest aching. Asher hadn't just moved. He had spoken. It was mid-morning when Daniel returned. The rain from earlier had left a thin sheen on the asphalt outside the Wyndham Animal Emergency Center, and the glass doors reflected back a man who looked like he'd slept through war and grief both, and maybe hadn't made peace with either. Daniel Grady wore the kind of stillness that veterans often carried, not absence of movement, but presence shaped by memory. He entered quietly, nodding at the front desk nurse, who simply pointed down the hallway without needing to be asked. "Room 2B, Isolation Wing." He paused outside the glass door, gaze settling on the figure within. Asher lay curled against the padding, one foreleg still stitched and wrapped, but his breathing no longer labored. There was something alert in his posture now, not fearful watchful, the kind of awareness born not from instinct but training and trauma. Emma noticed him and stepped out, pulling off her gloves. "He's better today," she said quietly, wiping her hands on a towel. "Still guarded, but he follows movement now, responds to tone." Daniel nodded once, then looked toward the door. "Can I go in?" She hesitated, then glanced back at the dog. "He hasn't let anyone but me near him. Not even Tex. But try. Just move slow." He nodded again, understanding the unspoken rules. With Emma beside him, he stepped through the door. Asher's eyes opened the moment the lock clicked. He didn't growl, didn't bark, but his ears shifted, and his body tensed, not in aggression, but inquiry. Daniel crouched, lowering himself to eye level. His hands stayed at his sides, palms open. Every movement deliberate, as if reaching into memory. "Hey, boy," he said softly. Asher didn't blink. He studied the man like a soldier scanning terrain. "My name's Daniel," he continued. "You probably don't remember me, but I remember you." Emma, watching silently from the doorframe, furrowed her brow. Daniel's voice dropped, colored by something more personal. "You were stationed with 2nd Recon, Firebase Hades, Kandahar Province, 2015. Asher's ears twitched at the sound of the name. Not dramatically, but enough. "I was there the day the convoy was ambushed," Daniel went on, slower now, like unspooling a thread. "I remember reading your report after. You found the 3rd IED before it detonated, saved 6 of ours, maybe more." Still no sound, but Asher's head tilted ever so slightly. Daniel reached slowly into his coat pocket, withdrawing a faded patch worn and frayed, but unmistakable. Black dog silhouette, gold shield, K9 Recon unit. "I kept this," Daniel said, placing it on the floor in front of him. Didn't know why. Just couldn't throw it away. He didn't reach for the dog. He waited. The silence between them wasn't empty. It was loaded. The way two veterans might size each other up without needing words. Somewhere beneath the instinct, beyond the pain, was a recognition, not of face, but of presence. Asher moved first, just a few inches forward, then a pause, then more. Daniel stayed completely still, and then, finally, the moment broke. The German shepherd pressed his head, still bandaged, still bruised, into Daniel's outstretched hand. Not hard, not urgent, but real. Emma gasped. Daniel didn't say anything for a while. His fingers simply rested against the fur that bristled under old tension and slow trust. "There you are," he whispered, voice rough. Asher let out a quiet, low breath, almost like a sigh. Later, Emma stepped into the hallway with him, heart pounding. "You didn't tell me you'd seen him in Afghanistan." Daniel shook his head. "I didn't think I had. Not really. Just the name on reports. Asher, Tactical K9, Unit Bravo Echo. He was a ghost even back then. No handler kept him long." Her brow creased. "Why?" Daniel looked back through the window where the dog now rested, calm, eyes closed. "Too smart, too reactive. Picked up on things before they happened. They said he was preemptive. Isn't that a good thing? It should have been. But some people don't like dogs who don't wait for orders." He didn't need to elaborate. They both understood. That night, as Emma checked vitals and adjusted Asher's saline, she noticed something she hadn't seen before. He was watching the door, waiting, not for escape, for Daniel, for someone who remembered him. Not just the soldier, not just the asset, but the soul who had once saved lives and been left behind. And now, for the first time since the fall, he was letting himself be found. The morning light came soft and slow through the blinds, painting thin gold lines across the floor of Recovery Room 2B. The room smelled of antiseptic and warmed gauze, but beneath it all, faint, barely, there was the earthy scent of dog, of life. Emma stood just inside the doorway, coffee untouched in her hands. She watched as the vet tech, Lily, knelt beside Asher with quiet care, looping a supportive harness around his chest and hindquarters. "Okay, big guy," Lily whispered. "Let's see if your legs still remember how to listen." Asher didn't respond right away. His eyes moved, first tracking the sling, the space, the humans, calculating, judging. Then, slowly, he shifted, one paw forward, a tremble, then another. Emma forgot to breathe. His legs quivered with each motion, the atrophied muscles protesting, unsure. But he didn't stop. He leaned into Lily's gentle hold, shoulders low, balance shaky, but he kept going. 6 steps, then 7. Then he stood, unassisted, just for a moment. But that moment held the weight of something sacred. Emma's throat clenched. She turned away slightly, but it was too late. The tears were already welling. She blinked them back hard, blinking like someone trying to stay clinical, detached. But there was nothing clinical about what she felt. There was nothing clinical about watching something that had been given up on, take a step toward living again. Asher didn't look at her. But his ears turned slightly in her direction. He'd heard her breath hitch. He knew. Lily whispered, "That's my guy," and steadied him as he lowered back onto the padded mat, exhausted but alert. Emma stepped forward then, kneeling beside him. Her hand hovered before resting gently behind his ear. "You're not done yet," she murmured. "Not even close." Asher let out a low exhale, his body folding into a position of calm. Not total trust, not yet. But no longer fear. Outside the glass wall of the recovery wing, the whiteboard on the wall bore a single line in red ink: DOD, review 48 hours, 2 days left. Emma stared at it, her heart thudding against her ribs like a clock winding down. Later that evening, Daniel found her alone in the staff lounge, sitting beside the vending machine with a half-eaten granola bar in her hand and a 1,000-yard stare in her eyes. "He walked," she said before he could speak. Daniel raised an eyebrow. "Walked?" "7 steps," she replied, "unassisted for one of them." Daniel let out a slow breath. Damn. He shouldn't even be conscious, not with the spinal trauma and blood loss, but he got up because he wants to live. Daniel was quiet for a moment. Then, "That won't mean anything to the board." She looked at him, tired and sharp all at once. "Then we make it mean something." Daniel tilted his head. "How?" Emma stood, brushing crumbs off her scrubs. "You still have friends in the 2nd Recon Medical Records Division, right?" "Maybe." "Then we get the full file. Not just what they gave us, everything. I want to know exactly what was done to him, what meds he was given, how he was discharged. If they want to classify him as a threat, we make them prove it." Daniel gave her a long look, then nodded. That night, Emma returned to Asher's room. She sat beside him, not speaking at first, just existing in his space. He lifted his head when she came in, not startled, curious. Emma reached into her coat pocket and pulled out a small plush toy shaped like a fox, its fur matted and old, seams barely holding. "My first dog used to carry this everywhere," she said softly. "He'd chew it to death, then cuddle it like it was his cub." She set it beside Asher's paw. "I thought you might need someone to fight for, too." Asher didn't move, but his paw slid forward just slightly and rested against the toy. Emma smiled, tears still clinging to her lashes. It wasn't much, but it was a glimmer. And for now, hope was enough to fight with. The wind was sharp that morning. Not cruel, but enough to sting, enough to remind the crowd gathered in front of the Channel 9 news van that something serious was about to unfold. A makeshift podium had been placed just outside the veterinary hospital. Behind it, a row of microphones stood like quiet sentinels. The parking lot, normally half empty, was now ringed with camera crews, curious pedestrians, a few local veterans, and people holding handwritten signs. Most read the same 3 words: "Let him live." Emma adjusted the light wool scarf around her neck and looked down at the bundle beside her, a tan, gray, and black figure wrapped in clean white gauze, strapped gently into a modified service harness. Asher. He sat upright, but slightly leaned. Bandages coiled around his rib cage, still healing. One eye was bruised and swollen, but the other, alert, unafraid. There was a solemn dignity in his stillness, like he'd done this before, sat in front of strangers and held a line. This time, the line wasn't a perimeter in a war zone. It was his life. Daniel stood beside Emma, jaw tight, hands clenched in his pockets. The words were hers to speak. He would bear witness. The anchor woman from Channel 9 gave a small nod, cued her cameraman, and said softly, "You're live in 5, 4, 3. And then the red light blinked on. Emma stepped forward. She didn't speak immediately. She let the image breathe. Asher sitting by her side, scars and all, the ache of his frame, the quiet steadiness in his gaze. Then, "This is Staff Sergeant Asher. He served 3 tours in Afghanistan. He detected over 60 IEDs. He saved 6 soldiers from ambushes. He made it home." She paused. "And now, because of a piece of paper, a regulation, and a misclassification, he's scheduled to be euthanized in less than 36 hours. Her voice didn't waver, but her hand, resting gently on Asher's back, pressed in. "They call him a behavioral risk. They say he's unpredictable. They see only his wounds. But what I see—" Her voice cracked just slightly. "I see a survivor, a partner, a veteran." There was a hush, the kind that happens when people realize what they're watching matters, that it's not just a story, it's a line in the sand. "We gave him a medal, a name, a record, and now we want to erase him like a mistake." Emma swallowed hard. "As a veterinarian, I'm not supposed to speak this way, but I can't stay silent. Not when I've looked into his eyes every night for 2 weeks. Not when I've seen him fight to walk again. Not when I've watched him nudge a child's toy with more gentleness than I've ever seen in a human hand." She reached into her pocket and unfolded a single photo. It was Asher fresh out of service years ago, ears up, eyes proud, standing beside a soldier whose name she'd come to learn too late, Troy Beckett. Emma held it toward the cameras. He was loyal, even when the world forgot him. And now the world needs to remember. We do not throw away those who fought for us. Daniel stepped forward then, not to speak, but to place something in front of Asher's paws. A folded American flag. It had been his. He didn't explain it. He didn't need to. The crowd stirred. Behind them, a woman in a wheelchair with a Vietnam pin on her jacket wiped her eyes. The story aired that evening on 3 stations. By nightfall, the clip had hit 200,000 views online. The next morning, it was on national feeds. Hashtags emerged like roots through pavement. Save Asher. He served. 2, more than property, but none of that mattered, not yet, because policy didn't care about virality. The euthanasia order still stood, and the countdown had begun. It started slow, a few retweets, a handful of comments, mostly from local followers of Channel 9's Community Beat. Then someone clipped the exact moment Emma said, "We gave him a medal, a name, a record, and now we want to erase him like a mistake." The line hit like a match on dry grass. By sunrise, it was everywhere. The hashtags appeared as if summoned by instinct. Justice for Asher. He served 2, save our soldiers, all of them. Within hours, the video had been reposted by animal rescue groups, veteran coalitions, and high-profile accounts that rarely posted anything at all. Then came the first celebrity, a Grammy-winning country singer, herself the daughter of a Marine, tweeted, "This broke me. We don't get to throw away heroes when they're no longer useful. We don't do that, not in this country." Justice for Asher. That post alone crossed 1.7 million views before noon. Suddenly, Asher wasn't just a dog. He was a symbol. At the Department of Defense, inboxes strained under the weight of outrage. Some messages came in all caps. Others read like eulogies for soldiers still breathing. Subject lines said things like, "You owe him better. Honor the contract. I held my brother while he died. His dog never left. Don't do this." One message, sent from a private Gmail with a signature line reading USMC 2001-2009, simply said, "Don't kill my replacement." In Emma's clinic, the phone rang constantly. Most were reporters. A few were people offering money. One woman said she'd build a sanctuary if it meant Asher could live his days in peace. Emma didn't answer most of them. She was seated on the floor beside Asher's cot, laptop open, the screen glowing with comments and videos. There were montages, now clips of Asher walking, eyes wide and focused, intercut with footage of military dogs in action. Some used orchestral music, others used silence. Emma reached out and scratched gently behind his ear. "They're talking about you now, warrior," she whispered. He didn't stir much, but his tail shifted once, slow, like a distant drumbeat finding its rhythm. At a small cafe in Northern Virginia, Daniel sat across from an old friend, a retired JAG officer named Liz Serrano. Her face was stone, her eyes fierce. "They'll never admit fault," Liz said flatly. "Not in writing. But if you can get enough pressure, enough heat, they'll look for a way out that doesn't taste like loss." Daniel leaned forward. "Define heat." She turned her phone around. Her social media feed was overflowing. "This," she said, "is a 5-alarm fire. Now don't waste it." By nightfall, CNN ran the story under the chyron. "Military hero dog scheduled to die. America responds." A retired general weighed in live, visibly emotional. "If we do this, if we end the life of a dog that served more faithfully than half our politicians ever will, then we've lost more than our soul. We've lost the last honest thing left in uniform." It was no longer just a rescue case. It was a reckoning. And yet, in a quiet office on the 3rd floor of a government building, someone still held the order. The status hadn't changed. Asher, euthanize by 8:00 a.m. The clock on the wall blinked 7:41 a.m. Emma hadn't moved in hours. She was curled up on the clinic's floor, her back pressed to the wall beneath the window, phone in one hand, the other resting on Asher's shoulder. He lay still beside her, chest rising, shallow but steady. Bandages wrapped his side like a battlefield patchwork quilt. The room was silent, save for the soft wheeze of the oxygen unit and the occasional rustle of wind outside. At 7:42, Daniel entered, a coffee in each hand and a jaw clenched tighter than his grip. "Still nothing?" he asked. Emma shook her head. Her voice came out hoarse. "Not a word." She hadn't slept. Neither had he. At 7:47, her inbox refreshed. A single new message appeared. No subject line, just a government address and a timestamp. Emma's breath hitched. She opened it. To Dr. Emma Caldwell, from Department of Military Animal Affairs. Time, 07:47 a.m. EST, subject, body, execution order suspended, reevaluation in progress, further instruction to follow. Her vision blurred. "Daniel," she choked out, holding the phone up with a trembling hand. "They paused it. They paused it." He stepped forward, reading the message over her shoulder. His brow furrowed, the lines on his face deepening. "It's not a win," he said quietly. "It's a stay of execution." Emma looked at him, stunned. "But, Emma," he interrupted gently, crouching to meet her eye. "I've seen this kind of language before. It means they're afraid. Of the noise, the heat. But they haven't changed their mind, they're just biding time." She nodded, tears forming but not falling. "Then we keep the noise going," she whispered. Daniel gave a half smile. "Damn right we do." At 7:58 a.m., Emma posted a photo. Asher, still on his cot, eyes barely open but alive. Beside him, a printout of the email with one line highlighted in yellow. Execution order suspended. Her caption read, 18 minutes. That's how close we came to losing him. Temporary isn't enough. He served us. Now we serve him. Hash our justice for Asher. It spread like fire. That afternoon the clinic was quieter. The calls slowed. Reporters waited outside. But inside there was something neither Storm nor Signature could touch. Asher moved his paw. Just slightly. Emma noticed. She leaned in and whispered, "You're still with us. For now. But I promise I'm not letting go until you can run again." Daniel stood in the doorway, watching. His phone buzzed with alerts, statements, and legal back-channel chatter. But his eyes were fixed on the dog in the room. Not an asset, not a risk, not a line on a form, just a soldier, still breathing. The room was cold in that specific military way, sterile, windowless, humming faintly with recycled air and bureaucracy. Colonel Barrett sat stiffly behind a steel desk. His uniform was crisp, his posture military perfect, but his eyes betrayed something else. Fatigue and guilt. Emma and Daniel entered quietly, exchanging a glance. Neither had been summoned to a government building since the media firestorm began. That alone said enough. The colonel didn't stand. He simply gestured to the two chairs across from him. "Dr. Caldwell, Detective Grady." Daniel nodded. "Colonel." Emma sat slowly, fingers curled tight around the folder in her lap. "You said this was urgent." Barrett didn't speak at first. He slid a manila envelope across the table. Thick, labeled Operation Ravenglass, Kandahar, Dec. 2018, classified. Emma hesitated, eyes flicking between the colonel and the file. "What's this?" Barrett exhaled, a long, tired sound that seemed to deflate even the stiffness in his shoulders. "You're fighting to keep a soldier alive," he said. "Before you go further, you need to know what's buried beneath the medals." Daniel reached forward, opened the envelope. The first photo was grainy, time-stamped in red, 12/14/18. The image showed a man on the ground face, contorted, arm twisted at a brutal angle. Blood pooled near his ribs. And beside him, restrained by two handlers, teeth bared and muzzle torn, was Asher. Emma's breath caught. "What is this?" she asked, barely a whisper. "Interpreter named Wally Haddad," Barrett said. "Civilian contractor. The report says Asher attacked him without provocation." Daniel frowned. "Who filed the report?" "Troy Beckett," Barrett replied. "Team lead. He was Asher's handler." The name hung heavy in the air. Emma felt it like a punch to the lungs. Troy never mentioned this." Barrett nodded solemnly. "Because within 72 hours the report was sealed under Directive 47A, and Troy was discharged. Quietly. Medically." Daniel turned the page. Another form. Handwritten notes. Then redacted lines. Whole paragraphs blacked out. "Why?" he asked. "Why bury it?" Barrett's jaw clenched. "Because the mission was a failure. A civilian convoy was hit. The details are murky. There were accusations the interpreter had compromised the route. There were deaths, American and Afghan." Emma looked up, her voice fragile. "You think Asher was trying to stop it?" Barrett met her gaze squarely. "I don't know what I think. But I know animals don't lie. And Asher never bit another soul before that day, nor after, until the rooftop incident. Daniel closed the file, jaw tight. So now this resurfaces, and suddenly he's unstable. It's a narrative, Barrett said simply. A convenient one. Emma stood slowly, the file still in her hands. Why now? Why show us? The colonel hesitated, then said almost too quietly, "Because I owe him. He saved my men twice. And because I saw the footage of what he did on that rooftop. That dog isn't broken. He's still serving." Silence. Emma clutched the folder to her chest like a life preserver. Daniel placed a hand on her back. Barrett looked at them both and added, "You'll have enemies after this, people who prefer him buried. But if you want the truth, there's more. Start with that file." Emma nodded once. "We won't stop." That night, Emma sat alone in the clinic's office, the folder open before her. The overhead light flickered, casting shadows on the table. Her hands trembled as she flipped through the final page, a vet assessment dated 3 days after the Kandahar incident. Subject exhibits signs of trauma, heart arrhythmia, refuses food, avoids all eye contact. Recommendation: retirement, not euthanasia. She exhaled brokenly. They knew, even back then? From the other room came a soft thump, then a whimper. She rose slowly and found Asher awake, watching her through half-lidded eyes. "I know what they said about you," she whispered, kneeling beside him. "But I know who you are." He blinked once, then, with great effort, nudged his nose toward her knee. It was small, but it was everything. The storm didn't hit with thunder. It came quietly by email. Emma was halfway through sterilizing Asher's bandages when Daniel entered the clinic with his phone clutched in one hand like a grenade. "You need to read this." She wiped her hands and took it. The message was brief. Too brief. "Pending internal review, all adoption procedures for subject Asher are temporarily suspended. Further communication will follow." No explanation, no signature, just an invisible hammer crashing down. Emma blinked at the screen. Suspended? What does that even mean? Daniel's jaw was tight, voice low. "It means someone panicked, and I think I know who." Later that afternoon, they met Colonel Barrett again, this time not in an office, but outside the military base, in the shadow of a steel communications tower. He didn't wear his uniform, and he didn't look like a man giving orders anymore. "I warned you," he said quietly. "There are people who don't want this dog's story public. And now, he's a liability." Emma stepped forward, fire rising in her chest. "He's a veteran. You said it yourself." "And now he's also a headline," the colonel replied. "You didn't just wake up sympathy, you woke up suspicion. Someone out there believes Asher didn't just react in Kandahar. They think he executed the wrong man." Emma's stomach dropped. "You mean they're trying to say he got it wrong?" "That's the whisper," he said grimly. "That Wali Haddad was innocent. That Asher ruined a peace accord by attacking a diplomatic figure." He paused, then added, "And if that sticks? This doesn't end with suspended adoption. It ends with protocol, destruction." Daniel's eyes flashed. "You buried the file, and now you're letting them use it against him." "I'm not letting anything happen," Barrett replied. "But I can't stop the machine once it starts moving. You've turned him into a symbol. That means every side wants to own the narrative, or erase it." The silence between them was suffocating. Emma finally whispered, "He didn't deserve this. He served." Barrett looked away. "War doesn't care who deserves what, Doctor. But politics? Politics eats the wounded." That night, Emma sat beside Asher's kennel, her fingers curled through the bars as he slept. His chest rose and fell slowly. He was healing. But the world outside was unraveling faster than she could hold it together. On the floor beside her lay a copy of a local op-ed. The headline blared, "War Hero or Mistake? The Divided Story of K-9 Asher." Emma stared at it until the words blurred. They were losing ground, and fast. Daniel entered quietly, carrying a laptop under one arm. "I pulled more records from the Kandahar mission," he said. "There's something not right. The man Asher attacked Wali Haddad, he wasn't just an interpreter. He was under surveillance. Joint Task Force suspected him of leaking troop movements." Emma blinked, stunned. "Then why would they say he was innocent?" "Because that part of the file was sealed, never confirmed, and if the wrong people had their way, never investigated." She felt her voice tremble. "And Asher's paying the price." Daniel nodded slowly. "Unless we find proof, unedited, verifiable, something that shows why Asher did what he did." The next morning, a representative from the Defense Animal Program arrived. Ms. Kern, a thin woman with a stern jaw and clipboard permanently fused to her hands. She did not pet Asher. She didn't even look at him. "We're here for a final behavioral reevaluation," she said. Emma stood her ground. "Final?" Kern didn't flinch. "The adoption process is under administrative review due to reputational concerns. Until further notice, you are not to transport or promote this animal in any public setting. Media appearances are prohibited. Do you understand?" Emma's mouth opened in protest, but Daniel placed a hand gently on her shoulder. "We understand," he said. His voice was calm, but his eyes weren't. Kern continued, "This dog's past is now considered a matter of national interest. If found to pose any risk, euthanasia will proceed per Title 10 protocol." Emma choked on a breath. Daniel spoke firmly. "You're not evaluating a dog. You're writing a narrative." Kern turned, already walking away. "In Washington, sometimes, those are the same thing." That evening, Daniel stood at the whiteboard in Emma's office. The Kandahar timeline stretched across in black marker. Asher's bite, the convoy ambush, the failed mission. And now an interpreter who may not have been what he seemed. Emma watched him work, her voice barely a whisper. "What if we can't prove it?" Daniel stopped, turned to her. "Then we do what soldiers do when the map burns in their hands." He looked down at Asher, resting near the heater. "We follow instinct." Emma didn't sleep. While the rest of the world debated Asher's fate on television panels and comment threads, she was chasing a ghost through digital aftershocks of a war no one wanted to remember. His name had only appeared once. Elijah Green. Buried in the declassified fragments of the Kandahar mission report, his name surfaced next to the words, "Field Medic. Survived." No interview, no deposition. Just one line. Emma circled it with red ink like a lifeline. "If there's anyone who saw what really happened that day," she whispered to herself, "it's him." They found him 3 days later. Not in a VA hospital, not in a base, but on a sun-scorched ranch in rural Texas, 3 hours outside El Paso. The road to the property was more dust than pavement, flanked by tumbleweed and silence. Emma sat in the passenger seat of Daniel's truck, heart pounding like the moment before a verdict. As they pulled up, a figure emerged from the barn-broad shoulders, a limp, sun-worn face hidden beneath a brimmed hat. He didn't wave, just watched. "That's him," Daniel said, cutting the engine. "How can you be sure?" "You never forget the face of someone who once held your blood in their hands." Elijah Green was not a man eager for company. But when Daniel stepped out and said, "Kandahar, October 2018, the old medic's shoulders slumped, as if the weight of 5 years collapsed in a single breath. "You'd better come inside," he muttered. The inside of the ranch house smelled of cedar and liniment. A cane leaned against the doorframe. The living room was sparse. Just a leather chair, an oxygen tank, and a faded American flag folded into a triangle on the mantel. Elijah poured 2 glasses of water, then sat across from Emma and Daniel like a man expecting bad news. "You're here about the dog," he said finally. Emma nodded. "Asher." The old medic closed his eyes. "He was more than a dog. He saved lives, mine included." Daniel leaned forward. "The official report says he attacked an unarmed interpreter, that he might have compromised the mission." "Yeah, and some reports said the moon landing was filmed in a studio," Elijah snapped, then softened. "I saw what he did. I saw why he did it. You want the truth? You came to the right ghost." He told them everything. Wali Haddad hadn't been just an interpreter. He was trusted, too trusted. He had access to convoy routes, mission maps, and the daily patrol schedule. Elijah remembered feeling off the moment Wali insisted on switching vehicles, claiming the medic needed more air. The truck he'd left was hit by an IED 2 hours later. And then came the confrontation. Asher was pacing, whining. Something had him spooked. When Haddad approached Captain Reyes with a hand behind his back, that dog launched, took him down before a shot was fired. "Was there a weapon?" Emma asked. "A ceramic blade, taped under Haddad's sleeve, couldn't trigger the base scanners. Asher got to it first." Elijah paused, looking at his hands. "If he hadn't, we'd be dead. All of us." Emma swallowed hard. "Then why did the report—" "Because we were 1 week from a diplomatic summit with tribal leaders. Higher-ups didn't want headlines about us killing an interpreter. They sanitized the truth." Said Asher malfunctioned. Daniel's fists clenched. "He didn't malfunction. He fulfilled his mission. Tell that to the Pentagon and the PR teams." Emma leaned forward, voice breaking. "We're running out of time. They've suspended his adoption again. If we can't prove what you saw, they'll destroy him." Elijah looked at her for a long moment. Then, quietly, "I've got a GoPro drive from my vest. Wasn't supposed to have it, but—" He gave a small, tired smile. "I never was much for rules." Minutes later they watched it. Grainy footage, radio chatter, sand, heat. And then the sound of Asher growling, pacing, barking. Wali Haddad approaching. The glint of movement, just a flicker of ceramic in the sun. Then chaos. Asher lunged. Screams, blood, and a knife clattering to the dirt. Silence. Then the voice of Captain Reyes, clear as day. "He saved us. That dog saved us all." Emma covered her mouth, tears streaming. Daniel sat in stunned silence, then finally whispered, "This changes everything." Elijah nodded. "Then don't waste it." He handed them the drive. "Go. Finish what I couldn't." The room was smaller than expected. Just 4 chairs, a borrowed camera, and a backdrop hastily set up in the corner of a local news affiliate studio. The air conditioning groaned overhead, drowning in the low thrum of fluorescent lights. But for Elijah Green, it could have been a courtroom or a confession booth. He sat stiffly in front of the lens, his hands folded, a deep scar trailing down his left forearm like a ghost that refused to fade. Emma adjusted the mic clip to his collar. Daniel stood off camera, arms crossed, jaw clenched tight. The producer gave the signal. The red light blinked on. And for the first time in 5 years, Elijah spoke. "My name is Sergeant Elijah Green. I served as a combat medic with the 3rd Infantry Division. Kandahar Province. October 2018. He took a breath, steady but heavy, as if exhaling memories lodged in his ribs. That mission changed everything. And I've been silent too long. He began with the facts. The heat. The shift in convoy routes. The tension that thickened the air that morning like dust before a storm. How Wali Haddad An, interpreter they were trained to trust, had made 3 requests to change vehicles. How his hands kept twitching. How Asher, the dog, never stopped pacing. "You learn to read those dogs like you read people," Elijah said. "They don't bark for nothing. And that day, Asher wasn't wrong." His voice didn't shake, but his eyes dimmed, focused somewhere beyond the camera, beyond time. Haddad approached Captain Reyes, looked calm, too calm. Then his left hand moved under his vest. A long pause. That's when Asher moved. The video played next. Daniel had trimmed the feed to protect identities, but the essentials were clear. Asher's warning posture, the sudden lunge, the glint of metal, the fall, the scream, the knife. And then frame by frame, a black cylinder rolling free from Haddad's vest. "It wasn't just a blade," Elijah said quietly. "There was a fragmentation grenade under his shirt, pinned but rigged." He looked directly at the camera now. If Asher hadn't stopped him, that grenade would have taken out the command team, myself included. His words dropped like stones into a silent lake. "He didn't attack an innocent man. He neutralized an infiltrator. He saved us all." The interviewer tried to press him. "Why hadn't this surfaced earlier? Why didn't you come forward?" Elijah didn't flinch. "Because we were ordered not to. Higher-ups said if we buried it, we'd protect local alliances. The headlines would read, 'U.S. Dog Kills Interpreter.' That's not good diplomacy. They sanitized the report, called it inconclusive aggression, and then they sent Asher back to the States with no honors, no pension, no family." He paused, glancing toward Emma. "They locked him away like a piece of faulty gear, waiting to be discarded." Emma stepped into the frame, holding a photo Asher lying in the clinic, still swaddled in gauze, eyes heavy but alert. They gave him 2 days to live. 2 days, no trial, no defense. Just a quiet euthanasia order. Her voice trembled, but she didn't blink. He was a soldier, a hero, and they left him behind. The footage aired that night first in a 5-minute segment on regional TV, then repackaged by national networks within the hour. The clip of Elijah saying, "He saved us all," looped endlessly cut into montages of Asher beside fallen soldiers, deployed in the desert, sleeping in a tent beside a young boy with bandaged legs. The internet did the rest. Comments poured in like a floodgate cracked open. "He did his duty. Don't let them erase him." If this was a human veteran, we'd never allow this. Justice for Asher. Period. Veterans groups began tagging the Department of Defense. A Change.org petition hit 250,000 signatures by morning. Celebrities reposted the footage. One senator called for an emergency reevaluation of the canine discharge system on live TV. Emma didn't sleep. Again. But this time it wasn't because of dread. It was because, for the first time, she wasn't the only one fighting. Elijah sat at the dining table, hunched over a legal pad. The television was muted in the background, looping images of Asher in uniform. Outside, Texas wind rattled the window panes, but inside, the only sound was the slow scratch of pen against paper. He didn't type it. He wrote it by hand. Every word, every detail, every date. Emma watched him from the kitchen doorway, arms crossed, eyes burning with the ache of both urgency and reverence. Daniel sat beside her, reviewing scanned deployment reports from a plastic folder marked Confidential, Op Bronze Falcon. "I don't want this to be a rant," Elijah had said earlier. "It needs to read like the after-action report we never got to file." And so it did. October 14th, 2018, Kandahar Province, Grid 42Q, MN 33765, 112-800 Unit, 3rd Infantry Division, Alpha Team. Subject, Incident Report. Infiltrator, neutralized by K9 Asher. Tag ID K90587. The statement began like any military document should. Crisp, factual, unemotional. But beneath the structure lay something far more human. At 13:04 hours, Asher exhibited elevated stress indicators, flattened ears, widened gait, fixed stare, while observing interpreter Wally Haddad approach Captain Reyes. Despite zero verbal commands, Asher acted unilaterally, initiating contact and taking Haddad down at the waist, exposing a concealed fragmentation device taped beneath his ribcage. He included timestamps from his medic body cam, entries from his own field log, and a diagram of the grenade's position drawn from memory, but annotated with chilling precision. "I treated Captain Reyes for minor shrapnel lacerations sustained in the scuffle. No other injuries occurred due to Asher's rapid intervention. This action directly prevented mass casualty." Emma brought him coffee halfway through the third draft. Elijah didn't notice. He was in another world, somewhere between the dust of Kandahar and the sterile tile of that base clinic, still haunted by what they almost lost. At 1:12 a.m., he signed the final page. Then he folded the statement, slid it into an envelope alongside the GPS coordinates and body cam screenshots, and handed it to Emma without ceremony. "It's not just a defense," he said. "It's a correction to history." They scanned everything. Daniel encrypted the files into a military-compatible format, with the subject line, Supplemental Testimony. Regarding K90587, Urgent Stay Request. Emma composed the body of the email slowly, choosing each word like it might decide Asher's fate. To U.S. Army Legal Affairs, K9, Review Board. From Emma Carlisle. Subject, Immediate Reevaluation Request. K90587, Asher. Attachments, Formal Statement, Sergeant Elijah Green. GPS logs, medical notes, body cam stills. Please find attached an official first-hand account of the 2018 Kandahar incident involving Asher. This document includes supporting coordinates, injury logs, and annotated diagrams. It confirms that Asher's actions directly prevented a mass casualty attack. The facts contained are verifiable and unaltered. We are not asking for sympathy. We are demanding accuracy." She hovered for a moment, breath held, then clicked send. The room went silent. No cheers, no sighs, no resolution. Just that hollow, echoing stillness of knowing you've done everything you can, and now it's in someone else's hands. Daniel leaned back, folding his arms behind his head, staring at the ceiling. "They can't ignore this," he murmured. Emma didn't answer. She just looked at the photo of Asher beside her on the end table. His eyes, even in stillness, seemed to carry a weight heavier than any war. Not pleading, not broken, just waiting. The statement had been sent. The GPS logs, the annotated body cam stills, the testimony Elijah had folded with trembling hands. For a moment, it felt like the tide had shifted. But bureaucracy, Emma would learn, doesn't bend for truth, it stalls for comfort. 3 days passed, then 5, then silence. A terse email arrived from the Canine Review Board. Submission acknowledged. Further internal review pending. Timeline undetermined. That was it. No call, no follow-up, no acknowledgement of the grenade, the body cam stills, or the lives Asher saved. It was as if the past was too inconvenient to resurrect. Emma sat alone on the steps outside the shelter. A late spring drizzle painted the concrete in uneven blotches. She clutched a printout of the rejection letter in her hand. The ink smudged where her thumb had pressed too long. Daniel emerged from the building behind her, jacket draped over one shoulder. "Anything?" he asked. Emma shook her head. Her voice was barely audible. "They're pretending it's still a pending issue, like this isn't life or death, like he didn't bleed for them." Her hand trembled as she looked up at the cloudy sky. They'd rather euthanize a hero than admit they got it wrong. Daniel sat beside her, not speaking, just being there, silent, solid, unshaken, like a mountain she could lean into. She finally let the tears come, not the cinematic kind, not loud or theatrical, just quiet like a leak from a place inside her that had held on too long. "What if we lose?" she whispered. "What if after everything, he still dies in a cage?" Daniel reached over and took her hand. No platitudes, no speeches. Just a grip that said he wasn't letting go. "Then he won't die alone," he said. "And he won't die forgotten. Not ever." A moment passed, then another. The sky cracked open above them, releasing a slow, deliberate rain, cool and cleansing. Daniel stood and extended his hand again. "Come on. We've got more to fight with now than we did a month ago, and you still have his eyes in your corner." Emma took his hand and rose. Her knees were stiff, her chest still heavy, but she nodded. Not because she believed the system would save Asher, but because she knew she would not stop. Not while he was still breathing, not while the truth still had a name. The phone didn't ring. Not Monday, not Friday, not even when Daniel waited by the window all afternoon. But time inside the clinic didn't move like the world outside. Asher was healing. His gait was shaky but determined. Muscles trembled, scars still raw, but every step said the same thing: "I'm still here." Emma sat by him daily, clipboard untouched, whispering like she was talking to memory. "You don't owe them anything," she said, "but we'll still make them see you." The waiting room had changed. Letters now filled the walls, handwritten, crayon-sketched, typed with trembling precision. "You saved my brother in Kandahar. I'm proud of you. You're a better soldier than most generals." One near the thermostat read, "My mom says good boys go to heaven." But I told her you don't need to. We'll make sure you stay. Oliver, age 6. Emma touched it gently. Daniel said, "He's already someone's symbol. Now it's just about the paperwork catching up." Emma met his gaze. "I've seen how this ends. Animals with less press, more scars, and the system still looked away." Daniel nodded. "And yet you still fight for them." That night they stayed late. Emma curled beside Asher's enclosure, hand on his paw. Daniel sat across the room, buried in legal forms. Outside, thunder murmured. Inside, only Asher's breath and the quiet hum of hope. At 2:14 a.m. the silence broke. Emma's phone chimed once. She blinked, swiped, froze. Subject: Asher. Final review outcome. All prior allegations have been formally dismissed. Recommendation: honorable retirement. Disposition: cleared. Depth of Defense Canine Service Unit. The phone slipped from her hand, and then came the sob, raw, unfiltered, beautiful. Daniel bolted in. "Emma?" No answer. Just tears that healed instead of broke. He picked up the phone, read aloud. "Clearance granted, case closed." Asher cleared. He exhaled like he hadn't breathed in years. Inside the enclosure, Asher stirred, lifted his head, met Emma's eyes. Daniel knelt. "Hey, buddy," he whispered. "You made it." Emma pressed her forehead to the bars. "You're going home, Ash. No more cages. You're free." Daniel reached in, rested his hand on Asher's neck. The dog leaned into it. It wasn't celebration. It was peace. The paperwork was signed in ink, still wet with meaning. No press, no ceremony, just a notary, a quiet room, and two people who carried a dog through hell and back. Daniel signed first. When asked for emergency contact, he said, "Put Emma. She's not backup. She's family." Asher's name now sat on a real collar. He belonged. His war was over. Or at least, one of them. 3 weeks later, the clinic doors opened not for rescue, but for renewal. Asher stepped forward, fur shining in the morning light. The limp remained, it always would, but what people saw wasn't injury. They saw dignity. On his vest, a new patch. In training, PTSD companion dog. "Ask before you approach." Daniel knelt. "You ready, soldier?" Asher looked forward and stepped across the threshold. Training didn't erase who he was. It reinterpreted it. At the veterans group, folding chairs formed a circle. Wounds sat in silence, some with canes, some invisible. Asher moved slowly. No wagging, no fanfare, just presence. He stopped before Cola Marine, who hadn't spoken in months. Asher sat, leaned in, rested his head on Cole's knee. The man flinched, then breathed. One hand lifted, rested on fur. Two survivors, understanding each other without a word. Later, Emma and Daniel sat on her porch. Asher lay nearby, eyes half closed in sunlight. "He didn't just survive," Emma said. "He redefined what service means." Daniel nodded. He was trained to run toward gunfire. Now he walks toward silence. A breeze lifted a single leaf. Asher watched it float by. He didn't chase it. He no longer had to chase what wasn't his to carry. They kept a scrapbook, not for followers, but to remember the victories that didn't trend. The first time Asher nudged a veteran's hand during a panic attack. The day he instinctively stood between a crying child and a slamming door. A postcard. "I lost my husband in Kandahar." But watching Asher's story made me believe something good survived there too. He'd never wear a uniform again, but he'd still show up, because it was never about orders, it was always about connection. And when night fell and the world turned quiet again, Asher would curl beside Daniel's bed, one ear always tilted toward the door, not on guard, just present. Alive, chosen, home. The building didn't look like much flaking paint, oil-stained parking lot, but inside held battles no one could see. Daniel opened the glass door of Ridgeview Veterans Wellness Center. Emma followed, clutching Asher's new therapy credentials, and Asher Vest buckled walked in like he'd done it before. He hadn't. Not this kind of war. In the group room, 7 chairs sat in a crooked circle, men and one woman, quiet, distant, watching corners like ghosts might appear. Daniel said, "This is Asher." Silence. Asher stood at the door, still, watching, waiting for permission no one knew how to give. Emma unhooked the lead. "Go on, boy," she whispered. "They're not strangers. Just wounded." Asher padded in. No tail wag, no performance, just presence. He passed a cane, a Marine pin, paused at a man in a Navy hoodie, the youngest there, pant leg pinned above a missing knee. Asher lowered his head onto the man's good leg. The man began to cry. Not loudly, but like someone who hadn't let go in years. No one interrupted. They knew this grief, had lived it, and now they witnessed someone finally releasing it. Afterward, Staff Sergeant Linda Park pulled Emma aside. "We've had retrievers, labs, even a miniature horse, but that dog of yours, he didn't try to help. He knew." Emma smiled, voice trembling. "He's not mine. I just walked with him to this part." That night, Daniel drove down the hill. Asher lay in the back seat, alert, calm. "You think he feels it too?" Daniel asked. "Feels what?" "That this is bigger than redemption. That maybe the pieces were never broken, just waiting to land." Emma reached back, hand resting on Asher's neck. He didn't stir, but his breathing slowed. He knew. He was finally where he belonged. The long-term care wing smelled like menthol balm and old wood. Asher wore his new vest, navy canvas, white letters. Still serving. He moved room to room without sound, just the quiet rhythm of paws on linoleum. He sat beside a man with oxygen tubes. Waited. No cue. No command. The man trembled, then reached, touched Asher's head. "Good boy," he whispered. "Damn good boy." He laid beside a woman who hadn't spoken in days. She began to hum. He pressed against a double amputee whose nightmares woke the whole ward. That night, the ward was quiet. Emma stood in the hall, clipboard forgotten, watching him move steady, low, sure. This wasn't urgency. It was presence. No enemy here, just memories. Daniel joined her, handed her a cup of coffee. "He's different when he's working." Emma nodded. "He always was. We just didn't know what kind of work." One man tried to salute. Asher looked up, calm. The man's hand dropped into a soft pat on the head. No medals, no speeches, just honor. As they left, Asher paused. Emma saw the flick of an ear, the weight shift. He wasn't checking if they followed. He was saying goodbye. In the car, Emma held the vest on her lap. Her fingers traced the words over and over. Still serving. It wasn't just a title. It was a promise. And somehow, enough. The sun dipped low, bleeding amber through pine branches. Daniel sat on a bench by the therapy garden, shoulders heavy not from pain, but memory. Asher lay beside him, chin on his paws. No leash, no harness, just trust. They had finished a long day. 3 sessions. One man spoke for the first time in weeks. "I'm still here." Daniel hadn't said anything then, but now, under this fading sky, it rose inside him. He reached down, brushing Asher's fur. "You know," he whispered, "they said you were dangerous. Couldn't tell friend from foe. But you always knew." His voice caught. Then came a soft smile, equal parts sorrow and gratitude. "You saved them in war. And now, you're saving them in peace." Asher lifted his head, turned toward Daniel. Their eyes met. And Daniel swore he understood. Asher's tail flicked. Not a wag, just a slow, thoughtful sweep across the earth, like a page turning, like a promise answered. Inside, Emma watched from the doorway, arms folded. She didn't interrupt. Some moments are too sacred to narrate. The light faded, leaving only silhouette and stillness. 2 soldiers, one human, one not side by side. And if you listened closely, you could almost hear the battlefield soften, not disappear, but become something quieter, something healing. It started with a letter, folded in an envelope with no return address. Emma found it tucked into Asher's discharge file. Uneven handwriting, trembling strokes. "I watched the hearing online. I served in Kandahar, too. Lost my leg in 18. When I saw that dog look at the judge like he remembered, something cracked open. Tell him he made me believe again." Emma read it 3 times, then cried, not from sorrow but from the shift. Asher's story wasn't just theirs anymore. It belonged to others, strangers, a world starving for something honest. Letters poured in. A retired nurse wrote, "I hadn't smiled since my husband passed. Your video made me cry." And then smile. A 5th grader drew a caped German shepherd. "Captain Asher, defender of feelings." One email read simply, "He gave me hope. That's all." Emma began compiling them binder first, then a leather-bound journal. But it wasn't enough. She digitized, printed in color, laminated the pages. Added dividers, veterans, kids, grief, healing. She called it Ashes to Asher, Letters of Hope. In the evenings, Asher lay by her feet. Daniel would read aloud, "Dear Asher, you didn't judge me when I couldn't stop shaking. You just laid down and breathed with me. That night, I finally slept. Dear Emma, I wanted to end my life last fall, but then I saw the way you looked at him like he wasn't broken, and I thought, maybe I'm not either." They dedicated a whole wall in the clinic, a living collage of words and healing. Veterans stood quietly, some weeping, some adding their own. A janitor taped up a photo and whispered, "He would have loved this dog." One rainy night, Emma sat with the book. She opened the last blank page and wrote, "Dear Asher, I found you when the world had already made up its mind. You taught me silence isn't guilt, that pain isn't failure, and that love, real love, doesn't need a leash. You gave us back hope. Emma." Asher stirred, nudged her knee. "You want to sign it too?" she whispered. He rested his paw on the page. The print smudged. Perfect. The hallway smelled of antiseptic and lavender. Daniel walked slowly, envelope in hand, photo worn at the corners. He stopped at room 212. Nameplate, Beckett, Troy, U.S. Army Retur. "Doors open," came a voice. Inside, soft light, the hum of an oxygen tank. Troy sat by the window, frail but upright. He squinted. "Walker?" "No, sir," Daniel said. "I'm Daniel Reeves. I'm a friend of someone you knew, someone you once tried to save." He handed over the photo. A pause. Then Troy breathed in sharply. Asher. Sitting proud. Therapy vest gleaming. Still serving. Troy began to cry, loud, guttural, years of weight spilling out. "I thought I'd failed him. Failed all of them." Daniel rested a hand on his shoulder. "He stayed," Daniel said. "When it mattered most, he stayed. They told me not to talk about it. Said the dog was dangerous." Troy shook his head. "But I remember. He ran toward the blast. I'd never seen anything like it. And then, silence. That silence broke a lot of us," Daniel murmured. He handed Troy Elijah Green's statement, the one that cleared Asher. That rewrote the story. Troy read it slowly, then sighed from deep inside. "He really made it out?" "He did. He's helping others now." Troy blinked back tears. "That dog had a soul. I knew it. I believe you." A long silence passed. Piano chords echoed down the hallway. Someone relearning how to feel. "You think I could see him?" Troy whispered. "I'll bring him," Daniel said. "He remembers." As Daniel stood, Troy grabbed his wrist. "You tell him, thank you for staying." "I will," Daniel said. "But maybe you should tell him yourself." Outside, the photo still warm in Daniel's pocket. Back at the clinic, Asher waited. His tail would flick once, and that would say everything. Spring wind swept through Chicago's Veterans Park. Folding chairs circled a veiled statue. No fanfare, just people, veterans, children, dogs in service vests. In the front row, Daniel sat with Emma, at their feet Asher, gray now but proud, vest stitched in white, still serving. A woman stepped to the mic. "This monument does not commemorate war," she said. "It honors a bridge between what was and what can heal." She looked at Daniel. He stood, took the veil. Asher rose. They stepped forward. The cloth slipped away. Gasps. A life-sized bronze shepherd, steady stance, eyes not fierce, but present. At his feet, combat boots, a folded flag. Beneath, "He never stopped serving." An old veteran removed his cap. "I saw him once. Thought he was just a dog. Then he looked at me, and I didn't feel alone anymore." A boy pointed, whispering, "That's Asher, from the book." His mother nodded. "He made my husband believe in life again." "Can we pet him?" Asher stepped forward, head lowered. The boy touched him gently like he was touching something sacred. Emma looked at the flag above. It flapped, then stilled, just above the statue. A benediction. Veterans stepped forward one by one. A medal, a note, a patch. Daniel whispered, "He was never just mine." Emma nodded. "No, he belongs to everyone now." Asher sat between them. Tail flicked once, just once. That evening, as the sky turned gold, Daniel remained. He knelt beside the sculpture, ran his fingers along the carved words. Asher came, pressed gently into his side. "You earned every letter," Daniel whispered. Asher didn't move, just breathed, slow, even, as if listening. Above them the flag rose gently in the wind, and somewhere beyond the noise of the city, the battlefield faded, not into silence, but into peace. In the end, Asher's story is larger than one battlefield, one courtroom, or even one remarkable dog. It reminds us that every German shepherd, every animal, really, carries a silent vocabulary of courage, loyalty, and limitless empathy. When we choose to see that worth instead of a label or a scar, we create room for second chances, for unexpected heroes, and for communities that heal together. May this journey inspire us to fight for those who cannot speak, to honor service in all its forms, and to recognize that love offered patiently, fiercely, and without conditions can still rewrite the hardest chapters. Whether you adopt, advocate, or simply kneel to scratch a waiting chin, you become part of a quiet army that says, every life matters, every heartbeat counts. Carry Asher's legacy forward, stand up for the voiceless, believe in redemption, and let compassion be the flag that flies highest in your own life.